Carmen has more than 10 years of experience with organizational development by education. Her background she is education psychology, adult learning, and she specializes in strategic planning, organizational development, leadership training, and facilitation. She's high energy, so she'll get us going this morning, and she will help you see and think about ways that we can take the information that is in your CRB messaging toolkit and be able to use that. So welcome, Carmen.
Good morning. Can you hear me way in the back? Okay, great. I'll warn you that I'll probably walk in front of the slides because I'm a walker, but I'll do my best to make sure that you can see as well as possible. Everybody okay with me being on the floor? I'm pretty tall, so can you see me in the back? Fantastic. Well, I was so delighted when Leola called me and said, would you like to come and speak to the CRB? I was delighted because it was Leola, but I didn't know what the CRB was. I'll be honest. And that's really important because I think I need to tell you and be honest with you, transparent with you, that I do not understand the day-to-day work that you do. But I had an amazing opportunity before this speech to interview some of you and talk with you about the work. And as I did that, I came away even more excited about being a part of this event. In fact, honored to be a part of this event because the work that you do is amazing and it's so important. And as a member of the community, I'm so grateful for all of you. So thank you, and give yourselves a round of applause, please. So you might be wondering, if she doesn't know anything about CRB, why is she here? And I was wondering that too. But after listening to the interviews, I realized, there is a lot to talk about. And what I'd like to do today is share some of my expertise in the future. I spent a lot of time talking with people, working with people, and studying research that is all about thought leadership in the area of predicting the future. Predicting the future is pretty tough, wouldn't you agree? I mean, if we could, we all would have put money in our mattresses a couple of years ago and been more prepared. But there are some things that we do know, and some of the things I'd like to share with you today are what we know, how you can prepare for it, and what leadership's going to look like in the next 10 years, 20 years for the people who are thinking strategically. So I was told that this is an incredibly smart group. When I did the interviews, I was blown away by how intelligent the people in this group are. I was even maybe a little intimidated. So I understand that I can actually use this next hour and 15 minutes to move pretty fast. We're going to cover a lot. It's going to seem maybe like it's coming at you pretty quickly, but I've been told that this is the group to challenge. So are you ready to have a little bit of fun this morning and learn a lot? Okay, well then without any more delay, let's get started. So I get asked to do speeches maybe 2-3 times a month over the last 7 years. That's been part of what I do. And when people ask me, when people like Leola call me up, they pretty much know what they want. So they'll say, hey, Carmen, could you come and do a speech for us on generational clash of the workplace? I'll say, well, sure, I could do that. People call and say, hey, Carmen, could you come and talk to a whole bunch of lending executives about the economy and where things are going and what's going to happen? I say, sure, I can come and talk about the economy. I get calls from IT executives. Hey, Carmen, can you come to our IT conference and talk about the future of technology? I say, sure, I can do that. And I was doing that for quite a few years, and I was pretty good at it. And then I read an amazing trilogy by a guy named Neal Stephenson. Does anybody know Neal Stephenson? Oh my gosh, this is so rare. See, you told me they were smart, Leola, you're right. Nobody ever raises their hand when I say that. Neal Stephenson is an author who lives in Seattle. writes incredibly provocative fiction that's based a lot of times in history, mixed with a little sci-fi. It's very difficult to read sometimes and get through the books. But the most recent one that I read is a trilogy, actually, called The Baroque Cycle. And some of you might be getting excited and writing it down. But here, when I tell you what the Baroque Cycle is about, you're going to put a line through what you just wrote down. That's all right, I'll read the Cliff Notes. But if anybody does read this trilogy, please email me, because you'll be in my club of 5 people who have. The books are only about 1,000 pages each. The first one's called Quicksilver. And the concept is that it's really about if you read the back of the book, it'll say, it's all about the big conflict between Isaac Newton and Leibniz about who really invented the calculus. See, I can see you're like, ooh. But see, that's not what it's about. What it's really about is a time about 300 years ago where various royal courts thought that the cool thing, instead of having the court jester, the fool, the new cool, all the rage, was to have a savant. And so whose court had the best savant was a big deal. And Isaac Newton was a savant. And this is really kind of a book about the coming together of all of these savants and the merging. The second book is called The Confusion. Think about fusing together, confusing. The confusion of a whole bunch of things like science, art, history, medicine, philosophy, politics, economics, religion. Everything confusing together, led by all of these savants, to create what he describes in the third book, the new system of the world. Because you see, people like Isaac Newton had a day job too. They just ran things like the London Mint and stuff like that. Invented something called paper money. You may have used it before. It's a big deal. The idea that land could be represented on pieces of paper, people thought it was crazy. And so we have lived by this system of the world for the last 300 years. And when I finished that book, it suddenly dawned on me, I can't talk about generational clash anymore in a vacuum. I can't talk about technology anymore in a vacuum. I can't talk about the economy anymore in a vacuum. So when people call and they ask me for those speech topics, I say, okay, and then I show up and I talk about the system of the world. Because it's really about all of these things, and we can feel it, can't we? All of these things are converging together right now, major demographic shifts. 5 generations working in the workplace for the first time. I did a speech for Costco. Their oldest employee is 89 years old. Their youngest employee is 16. That's their span. Those are the demographics they're trying to work with every day. It's about massive changes in a transformational economy. Everybody says, this isn't your grandfather's recession. It's totally different. So it's a recession. It's the changing plates of demographics. It's politics. Ugh. I'm getting where I'm turning NPR off these days. Politics, religion, immigration. Everything's changing. And I truly believe that it's not just we're going to come out of a recession, but that we're going to emerge in the next decade. Look around at the landscape and everything will be different. And the things that happen in the next decade will create a new system of the world that we may live by for another 300 years. It's an incredibly scary time to be a leader. But I also think it's an incredibly exciting time to be a leader. I mean, this is the stuff that gets me out of bed in the morning. How amazing is it to think the new system of the world for generations to come? Ooh, that's big. You're going to go home tonight and lay down and go, oh, wow, Oh my gosh, that's really big. Now I have a lot to hold myself responsible for. So the themes today are going to be diversity. A lot of people, diversity is a word being thrown around, buzzword lately. I'm going to change diversity when I talk with you today and call it demographics, because I think that's a much more accurate way to look at it, and we're going to look at some research there. I also want to talk about generations today. What can we expect from the next generations of leadership? And how do we need to mold those generations? What's our responsibility to them? Technology. Woo! Stuff is changing. And it's changing extremely rapidly. If anybody's interested, go and look up a guy named Robert Keegan, K-E-G-A-N. Dr. Keegan works with Howard Gardner. You may have heard of him at Harvard University. And he talked about the way that technology is modernizing our world faster than we biologically can adapt. And what kind of impact does that have on people and our morale and our happiness? So let's talk a little bit about technology today. And then I don't usually do this, but I put passion up there because after I did the interviews, I was so blown away, and I kind of sat with all of the information that came out of those interviews. And I thought if I could sum it up in one word after talking with some of you, I would say that you exude passion. And it's contagious. And I bathed in the light for a while of your passion. And so I don't think that I can come here and talk with you and not talk about the passion that drives everything that you do. So let's get started. I talked a little bit about the idea of predicting the future, and then I told you, well, we really can't, and that's true. But there are a couple of things that we do know. One of the things that we know is that mobile technology is changing the world. Would you agree? Oh, yeah. I didn't get my little phone out of my bag, or otherwise I'd hold it up for you. But how many of you have some kind of mobile device now that allows you to do all, yeah, raise your hand. You probably got it with you here right now. It's probably on. It's probably in front of you on vibrate. Just look at it. I mean, it's totally changed, right? Because I fly all the time for my work. I spend a lot of time on airlines. I can tell you anything you want to know about any airline. And it was just about around 4 years ago that the major shift happened, where we'd be coming down to land, and it didn't matter. I could look to the side of me. There were kids, teenagers, Gen Y, Gen X, boomers, some guy who was 85 sitting next to me. Doesn't matter. As soon as it was just like the wheels were just about to brush the ground, everybody, 85-year-old kids, everybody whipped out that. And as soon as you just brushed the ground, they all went, what did I miss? The whole thing, I mean, it just lights up, doesn't it, with cell phones? How many of you are online right now? Did you have one? Oh, yeah, I guess I am. Think about a world where people are always connected. A world where we are always online. And it's not just transforming the way we live. The second thing we know about the future is it'll transform the workplace forever. Right? Absolutely will. So I have a colleague who says the 15-minute smoke break has now become the 15-minute Britney Spears update. And how many of you, I know I have a lot of people in this room who are retired, but for those of you that are still working, how many of you work sometimes at home or on the weekend or check your email on your phone? You're doing some kind of work-related stuff on your personal time. So how can it be then that we don't let you order a pair of shoes on the internet at work for that present for your friend's kid, birthday party that's coming up, How can it be then that we don't allow anything personal to happen at work? But we expect work to happen on your personal time. See, that blending that's happening, it's transforming the workplace. It's like trying to hold, you say, but I don't want that to happen. But it's like trying to hold back a tidal wave, right? It's going to happen. Mobile technology is transforming the way we work. I've read recently, mobile technology is the most disruptive thing to happen to the workforce since women entered it in the 1940s. Now that's big. Disruptive. I work a lot with some pretty big technology clients. I work with Bluetooth. Everybody knows Bluetooth. That's what makes those phones work. I work with Microsoft. We've worked with Microsoft at Extreme Arts and Sciences for the last 8 years. Work with the executives there. We've worked a little bit with Amazon.com. And so I get the chance to be inside these shops and see what they're thinking. And I feel very lucky because once in a while we get a video from an innovations group and we can see what's in prototype right now, what's in beta right now. So everybody get ready. Here's your glimpse of the future. It may take just a minute. Those of you from Portland might recognize that Umpqua Bank branch that they use to film in. What do you think? I heard both at the same time, I love it and that's scary. I think both, right? It's a little bit Minority Report, isn't it? You know, there's some there that seems a little bit scary, and you have to remember that these are some techno geeks' vision of the future. So, however, has anybody been to Skamania Lodge before? This is a really nice place, isn't it? And they have amazing facilities there for speakers. And I was there. There's a great IT tech there. He's about 14 years old. His name was Charlie, and Charlie was just fantastic. And I was testing out this video, and he was standing in the back of the room, and he goes, "Oh, wow, you know, Microsoft just came in and was working with us on setting up some of our new technology, and I got to play with some of that stuff." And I thought, oh, see, it's not just beta anymore. Now they're bringing it out, and they're starting to show it to these hotel IT folks. And so again, you look at this and you say, well, wait a minute. I don't want that to happen. Too bad, it's already in beta. And I understand the feelings. I'm not trying to make fun of the feelings. But the reality is there are things about the future we can predict, and this is one of them. So rather than complain about it, let's get ready. Let's think ahead. Let's look at how that's going to be used in a way that makes a difference for the communities and the families that we serve. So a lot of people tell me, oh, okay, you come talk about technology 2 generations because the boomers and the GI generation, they just don't get it. They just resist. They resist technology. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm just going to say, I think that's a myth. My daughter's grandmother, it's my husband's mother, just turned 70 2 years ago. And she was here visiting us, and we were walking through Pioneer Square Mall, downtown. Okay. And there's a Mac store there. So she's walking along with us, and my daughter at that time is 5 years old, and she goes past the window at the Mac store. And you know how they always put all the fancy things. Now it's the iPad, right? Well, at the time, it was iChat. Does everybody remember iChat? Now there's Skype and everything, so iChat's totally obsolete. But at the time, it was the coolest thing ever because you could have a phone conversation with your computer monitor and see the person you were talking to. Oh my gosh, how amazing. So she's walking along through the mall, and she's not interested in technology, and she sees that and freezes. She stands there and looks at that for a minute. She says, "What is that?" My husband says, "Well, let's go in there." Go in. I explain it to her. This was before the recession really hit. So she had a little discretionary income. And she said, "I shall have this." There's something like that. It was similar to that. She lives in Idaho. She's got grandkids that are in San Francisco. They're sometimes over in Germany. She's got, we're here in Oregon. They have grandkids down in Arizona. And she's thinking, oh my gosh, I can see my grandkids when I talk to them. So she immediately buys one of the little laptops for each of the households. And then she buys herself the biggest. You've seen that Apple monitor, right? It's like as big as a television monitor. She buys that, and she has it shipped home to Idaho and installed in her basement. Now, back in Idaho, she has a weekly meeting with some friends, and there's a lot of little gray-haired ladies get together, and I don't know what they do. I don't know if they play cards or what it is, but they call themselves, I think they have the coolest name. They call themselves the Steel Potatoes. And so in Idaho, the Steel Potatoes get together every once in a while at my mother-in-law's house, and they do whatever they do. So she says to us, she's pretty bossy, "Thursday night is your night." I don't know when the other nights, what nights the other kids have, but our night is Thursday night. And I'm going to call, and you set up Claire, and Claire's going to be there. That's my daughter. And we're going to talk on Thursday night. So, okay. So we've got the computer out in the kitchen, and she's got it on, and we set it up, and usually my husband and I are making dinner or doing whatever, and you can hear these talks that they're having. She's like, "So Claire, I understand that you like bacon. I've heard that bacon is very interesting to you now." And then she'll hold up, what is it? It's like a Zingerman's catalog. She's actually holding it up to the things down. Now look at this. This is the Bacon of the Month Club. And you see right here where it says, and you get cheese with the bacon. I don't know. They're talking. They're having a great time. Next month, bacon starts showing up at our house. But let me ask you this. You think she got all that cool cutting-edge technology and learned how to use it at 70 years old so that she could impress her steel potato friends when they come over? No. Why did she do it? So that she could stay connected with her grandkids. And when we work with people at Microsoft and other technology companies, well, often they say, "Hey, can you help us put together this speech?" I say, "Sure." We go up there and the executives say, "Well, don't even worry about it because I've already pretty much got it ready." I say, "Great. What you got?" They have 72 PowerPoint slides with the changes in code and the way that will make the device better. And you say, "Great. How long do you have? And they say 20 minutes. And so we've talked with them about, it's not how slick and cool the technology is that's going to be the winning device. The way you win in technology is to understand that people use technology in order to be connected. So I have this new really cool cell phone now where I can call people and text people, and I can send thousands of pages of documents to India if I want to. I got so many people in my contacts list, I don't even know who some of them are. But I could call all of them, I can text all of them, but I don't. Right? I just call, IM, text, and email. The same 8 people, basically. My partner, Randy Harrington, says, you know why you do that? Because we all have in our DNA the desire for a campfire. That's hard-coded in. We desire a campfire. And the world has changed so much that our campfire is all spread out. But that doesn't mean we don't desire it. And we desire it at 15, and we desire it at 25, and 45, and 75, and 85. And so if you can say, this piece of technology gets you access to your campfire, you watch how fast the boomers will adopt it. And that's the myth. It's not that boomers resist technology. It's that they resist it for the sake of technology. But I do think we're getting better at understanding these connections and what it means to facilitate the campfire. And I want you to think next step, okay, what does that mean for the CRB? What about all these families we serve? What about all their campfires? What does it mean to be community? Because, see, I don't have to reject the technology because it's technology. I have to think about what this means in terms of building community, in terms of strengthening campfires, because that's glue that holds us together. It's what makes us human. It matters. Okay. Demographics. It always surprises me when I talk to, CEOs of banks, marketing people, whatever, and find out that they've come out of business schools with their shiny MBAs and they've never taken a class on demographics. It's not required. It's really not a part of what we study in order to prepare to be in business. And it's not really a part of what we study in order to prepare to be in the public sector. I talk to a lot of judges, I talk to a lot of attorneys, and they haven't really been in any demographics classes either. It's not part of law school. And it blows me away because demographics is really the closest thing we have to predicting the future. How can you be strategic? How can you lead and not understand demographics? So we're going to have a little bit of Demographics 101. And to kick us off, we're going to listen to one of the interviews that I had the chance to do with Lisa Papalardo. Lisa, are you here? Hi, Lisa. Thanks for talking with me. Are you ready? I'll let you know this is not a video, it is audio. So you'll see her photo up here, but you're just going to be listening to Lisa's voice of God come down. And this is some of what Lisa had to say.
Important to have a citizen voice in the review process because we want our government to reflect our local community values and the values of our citizens. And this is also, in a way, an oversight committee. In the tradition of our government of checks and balances, this is a way for the citizens to be a check and a balance with the Department of Human Services and with our Justice Department. So if you want your community to be a safe, wonderful place to live in, you need to participate in making it that way quite a few years ago, when my children were very young, I was at McDonald's in the McDonald's Playland. And there was, I believe, a social worker there. I'm not entirely sure what her role was, but she had a young boy with her who didn't have a family, was a foster child, and he came up to me and said, "Do you want to take me home? Would you be interested in being my mom?" He was just wanted a family like any little child would want, and he was so engaging and such a lovely little person. I did want to take him home. I was not able to, but he really got me thinking. There are some great kids out there that, through no fault of their own, find themselves in difficult circumstances. I would like to see some younger people come onto the board. I would like to see us have a greater degree of empathy for the parents that are involved in these cases. And I think that we're more likely to get that if we have a board that has diverse experiences and diverse ethnic backgrounds.
Thank you, Lisa. So Lisa says some pretty important things there. One of them is she talks about the need for citizen voice in the CRB. And what does it mean to have a powerful citizen voice represented? She talks about this really being foundational to the values of democracy. It's huge. How many of you have spent the last day here talking about citizen voice? Right. This is big. And what Lisa tells us is that citizen voice should also reflect the community that you serve. And so for the first time in my conversations, that buzzword diversity pops up. And how many of you yesterday and probably the rest of today are planning to talk about diversity, the CRB, right? It's huge, and you know it's huge. You know you have to talk about it because it's absolutely critical to offering the best service for the community that you can, for being able to have that empathy that Lisa talks about. And so it's easy to say, well, what we need to do is invite more community-wide participation. And, hey, we need a greater ethnic diversity on the board. Those are easy to say, hard to do, right? Easy to come here and talk about, hard to figure out how to go out and make it happen. And I had to put the McDonald's thing up here because, oh my gosh, does that story just grab you? I will never walk into a McDonald's Playland again and not think about that little boy. Never again. That was such a powerful story, and it's really right at the heart of the work you do and why it's so important to figure out how. How do we recruit onto the boards volunteers that represent the community? How do we get a citizen voice that is more inclusive? And those are the questions I know you're grappling with over these 2 days together. I know they're hard. It's the hard work that you have to do as leaders. And I hope that as we talk about demographics, we'll give you a little bit more paint a little bit more of a picture, give you a lens through which to look when you go out to do that hard work. So let's talk about demographics. If anything I'm about to say in the next 10 minutes is even remotely interesting to you, I recommend you look up this guy, Andrew Zolli, Z-O-L-L-I. Andrew Zolli is the thought leader in demographics and futures research. I think the most amazing thing about him is that he has risen to this status of thought leader in this realm, and he hasn't even written a book. Can you believe that? That could never have happened 10 years ago. He has gained all of this recognition as a blogger through his blog. So you're going to have to go on the computer to find Andrew Zolli, but reading some of his blogs will be worth it. And one of the things that Andrew Zolli says is the composition of a society, whether its citizens are old or young, prosperous or declining, rural or urban, shapes every aspect of civic life, from politics, economics, and culture to the kinds of products, services, and businesses that are likely to succeed or fail. When you hear that, is there any group out there that should not be studying demographics? It affects everything. So we're going to talk a little bit about population pyramids. That's Demographics 101. Population pyramids. Is anybody really familiar with population pyramids? Raise your hand. 2 of you. Okay. So if I get this wrong, your job is to correct me and help me make sure I get it right for all these folks, because they're going to go to Demographics Population Pyramid Boot Camp now. And if nothing else, you are going to sound incredibly smart at parties. So here we go. Let's start by looking at a perfect pyramid. Why is this pyramid perfect? It's perfect because, first of all, it's shaped like a pyramid. Ta-da! It's also perfect because there are the same number of men as there are women. There's a lot of babies. There's a pretty strong middle, and there's a tiny little top. And that's perfect because you need to have a lot of babies so that you can have a pretty strong middle, and you need a nice strong middle because it's the middle's job to take care of the bottom and the top. See, this group is amazing. Perfect pyramid right there. They're almost never perfect. And I know now you're wondering, well, all right, smarty pants, what does the United States look like then? And I'll tell you, we're all going, woo, so excited for the 2010 census to come back, because what I'm about to show you is 10 years old. It's from 2000. It is the United States population pyramid in 2000. But I know, being the brilliant people that you are, you can look at it, advance it 10 years, and there you go. Here it is. It's not the best pyramid. Remember to advance it 10 years. So, who's this great big group down here? That's Generation Y. Generation Y. That's like 27 and younger. Okay? This is, rather than a pyramid, it sort of looks like an hourglass. They call this an hourglass population. So, who's this great, big, huge, oh my God, the snake swallowed the gopher group up here? The boomers. The boomers. How many of you are boomers? I knew I'd have. Hello, boomers. There are a lot of you. Who's this little anemic group right here? Those are the Xers. This is why they look so cynical all the time. But seriously, up until about 3 years ago, for the past 2 decades, times were good. Boomers, I'm going to tell you right now, you had it easy. It was a time of prosperity because you had a teeny tiny little bottom and a teeny tiny little top to take care of, and you're all just having a big party right here. Is that how it felt? But as we advance, now you're looking at your Xers, and remember we're advancing this about 10 years, so you've got your Xers at about 30 to 47-ish age group. And they're really moving into a place where they have an enormous bottom and an enormous top that they are responsible for supporting. And it's really going to be tough. And we can look out and say, yeah, we'll come out of this recession maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, but it ain't going to be pretty for a while because this is what we have to work with. And again, you say, well, I don't like that. Well, it doesn't matter because the babies have already been born. This is what it looks like. And there's all sorts of implications when we look at this little anemic section in every realm. For example, is there anybody in this room, any women in this room, born after 1970? Oh, good. Good. There are a few of you born after 1970. Well, congratulations. You will take care of your mother longer than she took care of you. First implication, Gen Xers, healthcare is getting better. People are living longer. I mean, it used to be, when you look at the boomers, that, if you read Andrew Zolli's stuff, he'll tell you there were 3 options for a boomer. Boomers are either in the next 5 years going to disappear in a puff of RV smoke, or 2, they're going to keep working because they have to, because they lost so much in the market and their retirement and everything else, or they're going to keep working because they freaking love it. Never, ever, ever was there more of a workaholic, defined by work, hard-working, competitive, individualistic generation than the boomers. You like your work. You're passionate about your work. You're never going to stop working. And Andrew Zolli says what that creates for the Xers is a boomer ass ceiling that they can't get past in organizations. So the first implication I talked about is you've got Xers who are going to be taking care of their kids and their parents. They're going to be living, what will our families look like? They're going to be living in multi-generational households. That has all sorts of implications for the community, doesn't it? Because then what kind of houses will they need? How will they shop? What sorts of diets will they need? How should Costco be bundling food now? Because, you've got kids and, what about daycare? What's that going to look like? I mean, everything about daycare has been a huge issue over the last 20 years. It's evolved a lot, but now what happens when grandma's at home and she plays a mean game of Halo 3? Right? So what will our families look like? How will they live? What are the communities going to be like? What kinds of homes will they need? What sorts of loans will they need? What sorts of savings accounts will they need? And then we move on to the boomer ass ceiling and say, okay, now you've got a whole bunch of Gen Xers that have moved into their late 30s and 40s, extremely experienced, high level of competency, ready for leadership and executive roles, and they're not available because in their organizations, nobody's leaving. And so what we see with this generation is, Generation X, is the most entrepreneurial generation we've seen in a century. That's why they're all at Starbucks working on I don't know what they do there, but they make a lot more money than any of us. And it's going to transform work because eventually, the boomers will leave. They will eventually leave. And then suddenly, the United States is in a huge crisis. All of our organizations lack executives and leaders. And so then you're going to get your HR strategists that are all going to run out en masse and say, oh my gosh, and they're going to go to Starbucks and they're going to try to find those people or those computers, and they're going to say, excuse me, would you mind coming back into the organization now, because we don't got any leaders. And they've been living an untethered work life. Does that make sense, untethered? And so they're going to come back and they're going to say, all righty, I'll come back, but work and personal are now one. This way that you're organized doesn't work for me. Oh, and by the way, do you have benefits for my parents? Because they're part of my household. And the most strategic HR people are already creating those benefits packages because we know this is going to happen. But there still aren't enough of them. So we have to figure out, in order to keep the United States strong, where else What else? Where else will those leaders come from? How do we make sure we have the best and the brightest? And I just told you there's no such thing as a perfect population pyramid, right? And then I found this. That's India. And what we know, you've been reading it, right? You've been hearing Asia will be the most powerful economic bloc by 2030. This is why. This is how we know that. And so you say, but I don't like that. But the babies have already been born. It is what it is. Now, what we can think about is, where are we competitive in all of that? Because a lot of them are going to come to the U.S. for their education. How do we make sure that along with all of the Gen Xers that we're going out and trying to hire, and there aren't enough of them, that we're also hiring the best and the brightest of the people who are coming here to go to school? Because that's what's going to keep us strong. But it does have some implications. One is that minorities will make up 1/3 of the U.S. population by 2016. Does anybody remember 2000? Remember Y2K, and it was like, it's all going to go black. Remember? And then Y2K happened, and everybody went, okay. But it doesn't seem very long ago. It just seems like yesterday. 2016 will be tomorrow. It'll happen so fast. And the question is, are we ready? Are we prepared? High schools are already starting to routinely offer Hindi and Mandarin as Asians become the strongest economic demographic in the world by 2030. My partner, Randy Harrington's got a daughter who just graduated high school in Eugene, Oregon. Their high school prom theme was Bollywood. It's big. MTV is already creating MTV Desi, MTV Chai, because they know. They're preparing. And the rise of these new blocks will change American diets, tastes, cultural references, but it will also redefine the notion of race itself, perhaps permanently. Now, this is really big stuff, and you may be saying, I don't understand how this is really going to play into my conversations that I'm having in my breakout session after lunch. So let me pull back and narrow in a little bit, and let's just look at the state of Oregon. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the state of Oregon is that you notice our anemic section isn't quite as bad as the United States. So per capita, we actually have more Gen Xers that live here than in other states. Now, you can go county by county. If you get really excited about this, you can go look it up. You just go to the U.S. Census Bureau. It's really fun. And you can go county by county and look at the situation. You know, Clackamas County is like super top-heavy and almost nothing in the younger sphere. You go and look at Marion County. Marion County looks like a block at the bottom and then a little tiny top. I think some of the Gen X representation is Salem and Portland. They tend to be younger cities. By younger, I mean under 50. They tend to be younger cities. So we do have a little bit stronger Gen X, and I think that's actually going to help the state of Oregon as we move forward. But let's talk about what we see for demographics. It's not so much the generations as it is the breakdown of the population. Right now, the Caucasian population in Oregon, us white folks, what do you think is the median age? Any guesses? 40? I heard 35, 45. That's really in the ballpark. It's 37. 37. The median age, though, of the Hispanic population in Oregon? 22. Gold star back there, 22. Median age of the Asian population in Oregon? 27. That's right, 27. So what does that tell us is going to happen as this age distribution moves up? it's not just how many people do we have here, but what's the makeup of the people that we have here? And especially if we say 10 and under, what's the makeup of your children that you're going to serve? Okay? So what do you see happening with the kids in the next 10 years? Bilingual, they're going to be Asian and Hispanic, right? Everybody's tracking with me. Okay, because the Caucasian population at 37 are pretty much done with their families, and we've got this enormous population in their young and mid-20s in Asian Hispanic populations, and they're just getting started having their families. So this is very interesting, isn't it? Because then you say, okay, now we've got different cultures that are making up the majority of the family base. How do they live? And we talked about Gen X being forced to take care of their children and their parents, and so we're going to see the Caucasian population increase in having multi-generational households. But Asians and Hispanics already culturally tend toward having multi-generational households. So it's absolutely crazy. We're just going to see a transformation in the way people live. The idea of two people living in a McMansion it's going to die with the boomer generation. It just will, partly because of cultural tendencies and partly because of the necessities of the Gen X situation. So what I heard is, will we serve those families? Because how do they live? And do they reach out to services? And so then that begs the question, doesn't it? Do those children need services? Yes, and different ones. So this is what you have to talk about this afternoon, right? Because this is the next decade of service. We can look at this as a bad thing. You know, there's some people who say, well, you see, that's why we got to just stop immigration. And I don't even want to go there. I don't want to get in that debate. But what I can tell you is that all of the numbers that I've given you assume that we build walls, close the borders, and don't let anybody else come into Oregon. Okay? Build walls, nobody else can come in. And the Hispanic population is growing at a rate of 200%. Okay? So these numbers assume no new immigration. So again, we go back to, well, I don't like that. But as leaders, and I'm an Oregonian. How many of you are Oregonians? I care deeply about this state and our community. And as a leader in this state, it's my responsibility to take this reality and turn it into the best state we can be. And it's going to take all of us working together to do that and to figure out how to do that, because I don't think we know. So moving on to generations, I promised we'd talk for a little bit about generations. Burning question? Mm-hmm. So at this point in history, the immigrants are disproportional, perhaps male. Sure. Yeah. Very good point. So the point here was that what you're seeing, anecdotally, what he is seeing is a lot of Hispanic male partnering with maybe a Caucasian Native Oregonian, and so maybe the immigration is disproportionately male. I would say, I don't know, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would say based on my experience that I would agree with you that seems to be true, and that's another piece that plays in. And then next step is, if we're also talking about, this is not assuming any additional immigration, then all of these children are native Oregonians. With two cultures. It's huge, isn't it? You go home, you're going to lay in bed tonight, and you're just going to sit there and think about it, because it's huge. One more question, and then I have to move on, or Leola's going to start freaking out.
Just really quickly, what does the demographic for China look like? Because I know they've
China. I wish I had a board here. China's demographic looks like, remember I talked about the snake that swallowed the gopher? Okay, it is that inverted hourglass, and it is skewed toward more men, and that's going to be an issue on the younger side. But the place where the bubble is huge is not the boomers, it's actually the Gen X. So that's why they place it with India in saying in the next 20 years, China and India, Asia is often how we refer to them. It may not be exactly appropriate, but that will be the most powerful economic bloc. So it is, to answer the question, where the question come from, it is a combination of China and India. I put India up there because it's such a perfect pyramid, but China's young people are just massive numbers. And so economically, for a time, that will be huge. Now, it gets tiny again because the male-female part is not perfect. Now you think about Italy or Ireland, they're freaking out because any guesses what their pyramid looks like? It's an upside-down pyramid. And they're very concerned that those ethnicities are dying out, that they're losing that population. So it's fascinating stuff. We could get way off track here, but I'm going to try and stay focused. So talking about generations, I had the opportunity to interview Jean. Jean, are you here? You're hiding under the table? Jean does not need to hide under the table because, as you all know, she is a woman of great wisdom, and we're going to share some of that wisdom with you.
When I talk about passion, the late Chief Justice Robert Willans from the New Jersey Supreme Court made this statement, and I will quote, "You are the eyes and ears of the court, a part of the court's conscience. You are also the eyes and ears of society and part of its conscience. Reviewers are one of the few institutions where the problems of the family, the efforts of the state, and the work of the judiciary meet. You are able to see what is working and what is wrong." I think that we as volunteers, we as a program, need to be very outspoken. And as I was trained, and those of my era in the course of the life of the CRB, we were trained to not necessarily be nice in writing our recommendations and findings, but call it like it is. Use fewer words, say what you need to say, and do it. We were advised of this from national leaders to local leaders, people that obviously we respect, and they respected us, and they saw the value in having objective review. A straightforward language in advocating for children, we've found that it's much more effective, and we have been trained to be very straightforward. The outcomes are much healthier for the children and the families and all parties concerned. The future of the CRB depends on volunteers who are passionate about the needs of children and the cause in general. I think we need younger board members, different ethnic groups, a well-rounded demographics represented on our boards. Yes, in order to maintain respect and effectiveness, I think CRB volunteers will require ongoing training and encouragement to be strong and speak out.
Thank you, Jean. Good points. Some of you may not know this about Jean, but she is a space traveler, and we were interviewing her from space there, so you may have heard her ship a couple of times. I really don't know why we use those sounds this time, but kind of fun. Okay, but seriously, Jean makes some incredible points here. The first one is direct communication in everything that you do. Calling it like it is, she refers to. And I think being able to, what we often say, name the devil, and do it without emotion, and really get to the crux of what's happening with families and with children is so critical in the work that you do. And I would actually go one step beyond that and say it's not just about the recommendations that you're writing for these families and for these children. It's also in the way that you all communicate with one another. I work with a lot of volunteers, various industries and organizations, and I work with a lot of people in the public sector, and I work with a lot of people in social services. And one of the things I'll say volunteers and people in public sector and people in social services share more so than when I'm working with financial firms and technology people and that kind of stuff. What you share is this amazing capacity for being nice. You're nice. And we're trained to speak nicely and say things in a nice way. I see lots of laughing and people nodding, right? And so it's a little bit out of your general mode of operations to be direct and call it like it is and name the devil. And Jean's saying, but that's actually the best possible way that we can serve. And I would say when you get together in the afternoon and you start talking about recruiting, Jean mentions you got to recruit younger people to the board, right, Jean? So not just diversity in ethnicity, which is important, from the demographics we talked about, but where's Gen Y? We've got to get some of these younger people involved, and how do we do that? As you go forth and you have all these strategic conversations today, really make an effort to say what needs to be said. So often I find at conferences, I'll talk to people afterwards, I'll say, so how did it go? And they'll say, well, it was pretty good, it was okay, it was great. But what they should have been talking about is A, B, and C. And you find out the things that really needed to be said are being said in the bathroom and in the hallway, and somebody calling somebody else on their cell phone as you drive home. And those are the conversations that should have happened. So I'm going to say you have limited time to take the helm of leadership in these big things that you need to talk about and strategize for. So just talk about it. Say the things that need to be said. And my one caveat to that is understand that when people say those things to you in these conversations that you have, that it's coming from a place of pure motive. Because every single one of you are volunteers, and you would not be here if not for that passion and for the commitment that you feel for children. I work with the Commission for Oregon Children and Families, and I spend a lot of time with various politicians in a room that do not like each other. It's not that they just don't even like each other's policies and beliefs, they don't like each other. And the only way we can really get things done and move things forward is that while they may all disagree, and many of them even dislike one another, they're in the room because they absolutely care about Oregon's children and families. That's the common ground. Language is so important. And Jean, I'm glad that you brought this up. I mean, think about it. There's so much in communication out there. How many of you have taken communications programs and studies, workshops, blah, blah, you're like, oh my God. The 7 habits of effective communicators or whatever. You could probably teach communication. You could get up here and do this instead of me. I'm not going to go into all of that. What I am going to do is take a little bit of the burden of being a good communicator off your shoulders. Because we all know the situations where, I'll be at Microsoft And it's really true, some of the stories where, the executive comes in and they actually take their shoe off and they're banging it on the table while they say whatever it is they've got to say to the group. And you're going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This isn't nice, right? I was in an actual meeting there where we're all kind of about 10 minutes into the meeting and things are going, there's an agenda and people are talking and they're working on this project. And then one of the executives comes swooping in late. And he pulls out a chair, he sits down, he interrupts the person who's talking, and he says, hey, sorry I'm late. I've only got about 5 minutes, though, and I just want to tell you that in order for you not to just fail at this, you've got to do 3 things, 1, 2, and 3. So, make it happen. All right, I'm late. I got to go. And he's out. And I remember sitting there going, what a jerk. Like, what a colossal jerk. We'll call him Joe. And everybody in the room was like, ooh. And they wrote it down, the 3 things he said. And they're like, that's so great of Joe to come in and give. And I'm looking at them like, are you kidding me? And they go, no, that's just how he is. He's a big teddy bear. You got to understand, he's trying to help us. That was so nice of him to come by and say that. And then we all know the woman who comes up to us at work or wherever and says, Ava, I love your hair today. It looks so good. Just really, really looks nice today. And I leave, and Ava turns to Michaela and says, that bitch. You know how Ava is. You know her. I cannot believe that she just said that to me. Nice hair. Because in all those good communications classes, and I'm not going to say they aren't good, that are telling you exactly how to say everything right, at the end of the day, we're smarter than that. At the end of the day, we're not listening for what people say. We're listening for what you mean. All the time our radar's on, thinking about intent. What's your intent? What's your intent? What's your intent? What do you mean? What do you mean? So I'm going to say, when you email each other and when you have these conversations in person and you're following Jean's advice and you're naming the devil and you're saying it like it is and you're getting the stuff on the table that needs to be talked about, that every time you hear some of those direct comments and you think, it doesn't feel nice, that you go to the place of intent and remember the motive is pure. And what I'll say to everyone who's giving those direct comments, the best way to be direct is, before you say the direct thing, put your motive on the table. Everybody's trying to guess at it anyway. So just say it. The reason I'm here today is blah, blah, blah. The reason I'm sending this email is because blah, blah, blah. First sentence. Hey, Jean, the reason I'm calling you is blah, blah, blah. We could all get so much better at laying our motive on the table. And if you can do that, and if your motive is pure, there's a whole lot of crazy mistakes you can make in the way you communicate, and people will overlook it. They will forgive you, so you can let go of some of that burden. I said we'd talk about generations a little bit. Generation X, we've spent some time on. They're really moving into that leadership position. They're absolutely been working differently. They are cynical. There's reasons why they're cynical. I think of Generation X as the age, like the generation of broken promises. Politics, big formational piece, leadership and politics. They would go to school and study Nixon, and then they'd go home, turn on the TV, and watch Monica Lewinsky. So they learned at a very formative age that you don't trust leadership, you don't trust politics or any of that, you don't trust government. If you do, you'll get screwed. Home life, marriage, first generation to see 60% divorce rate. And there was no system in place yet for after school stuff to do if you didn't play sports. We didn't take care of our children until 5. We didn't have all those services when Gen X was growing up. So you had a lot of latchkey kids. Anybody Gen Xers in here? You may have had the experience of, 2:30, you're getting off the bus, and your job at 2:30 when you got off the bus was to run from the bus to your house, in the door, close the door, lock, 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 run from the door to the phone, pick up the phone, and in some cubicle and somewhere in America was a boomer mom who was working, because they all work. And she's waiting by the phone. And if that phone in that cubicle with that mother doesn't ring by 2:32, then you had better be dead. Right? So now you're inside and you made the phone call. Now you can't leave. You're all locked in and safe. So what do? Watch TV or play Atari, pong, 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 right? What anything to do. But remember we talked about every generation desires a campfire? Then it makes all the sense in the world that when the internet became widely available, that generation would capitalize on that, and that they are the Steve Jobs of the world, doesn't it? Makes all the sense in the world that they created campfires in a different way. Same motivation, different manifestation, because it had to be. So if Generation X is a generation of broken promises, then Generation Y, I call the Gymboree generation. By then, we had all the social services in place. Everybody knows Gymboree, right? These are the kids who grew up in entirely supervised play. They were never sent out in the yard with a stick. Someone might take them. And so then they went to school. And school, see, what the boomers and the Xers share is we still sat in rows and worked individually, right? It's Generation Y is the first generation that, if you go into a grade school now, what do they look like? How do they sit? They sit just like you are. It works so well, we brought it to conferences. They sit alone. They do everything in groups. And now they're in college, and some of them are little baby attorneys and little baby doctors and all kinds of things. And they work collaboratively. We just hired our first Gen Y person into our company. Brilliant PhD, amazing guy. Clients love him. Just so smart, so cool, hardworking, all these things. And so I thought I was doing this huge favor because I gave him a big project when he was first hired. This is really cool. Oh, here you go. Look, I am empowering you. You're welcome. And let's say the project had part A, B, C, and D. And so he went off. He walks like that. And he worked on it a little bit. Then he came back, and he said, "Here, what do you think?" And he had done part 1 of A. And I'm like, I think it's not done. I was frustrated. But he is trying to collaborate with me. Because that's how they work. And so then everybody tells me, oh, these Gen Yers, they just have a sense of entitlement. Right? Have you heard that? Have you thought that? Then I go up to Amazon.com or Microsoft or wherever and Bluetooth, and there's these Gen Y people, and they're like working, and they got a little cot in their office. And it gets really late at night, and then they just lay on the cot and they're sleeping, but they're still working. Then they wake up and they're working. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they do not have a problem with work ethic. But they're also not sitting in cubicles. They're sitting in these weird, there's like no walls, and they're all kind of around, like their desks face each other, and there's a little umbrella over the top, even though it's inside. And I'm like, I don't understand why the umbrella's here. I mean, but it looks fun. And it's so hard because you say, well, how do you get the most out of Gen Y? How do we get the motivation out of them? And Steve Jobs, I think, stated it best. He says, well, they just want to make a dent in the universe. It's like, oh, okay. So now as leaders, I have to explain why filing this stuff makes a dent in the universe. Yes, that's right. You do have to explain that. And if you really want to see them work miracles, don't put them in a cubicle and tell them to work by themselves. They've never done that before. Put them in groups. And they will make magic. So again, we're talking about the transformation of the way that we work, the way that we get things done. I'm going to show you a quick video, and I am going to warn Leola that I'm definitely going to go over about 5 minutes. Is that okay? Because this is worth it.
If you catch me at the border, I got visas in my name. If you come around here, I'll make them all day. I get one down in a second if you wait. All I wanna do is take your money. All I wanna do is take your money. All I wanna do is take your money. All I wanna do is if you catch me at the border, I got visas in my name. If you come around here, I'll make them all day. I get one down in a second if you wait. Sometimes I think sitting on trains. Every step I get to, I'm clocking that game. Everyone's a winner, we're making our fame. Bonafide hustler, making my name. Sometimes I think sitting on trains. Every step I get to, I'm clocking that game. Everyone's a winner, we're making our fame. Bonafide hustler, making my name. All I wanna do is take your money. All I wanna do is take your money. High with skulls and bones, sticks and stones and weed and bombs. Running when we hit lethal poison for the system. All I wanna do is take your money. MIA, third world democracy. Yeah, I got more records than the KGB. So, no funny business. You already are.
What'd you think? Pretty cool, huh? So, I'm going to tell you 2 secrets about Generation Y as you go out to have your strategic conversations and how to recruit them as volunteers. First secret, they desire a campfire just like you. You have that in common with them. They really care about relationships. And they would like to have mentoring relationships. But you can't sit them down and say, all right, Sonny boy, I'm going to learn you up. They want mentoring relationships that flow both ways. And it's going to start with you zipping it and just asking them to talk. Why do you like that mobile phone so much? What's that you're doing? Build relationships with them first because they make every decision through relationships. Second secret about them, they actually believe. They're not cynical like Gen Xers. Gen Y are actually an optimistic generation. They believe in the power of groups working together to change the world. We saw that with Obama and the way they elected him. A lot of people called that their election. Politics aside, the point is they actually believe in the collective power of groups. How huge is that? You can tap into that. That's a powerful source of passion and energy. What now? People always want me to have all the answers. I definitely don't have all the answers. I do hope that today I raised some questions for you to consider. I think it's together that we're going to write on this whiteboard and create the new system of the world. There's no playbook out there that tells us how to do this. There's no best practices out there that we can really draw from because they don't apply to the way the world is shifting. We have to make up these rules together. It's hard work. And I do want to leave with some words from Ellen today, because I think she really talks about that passion that it will take to solve these problems. So here we go, Ellen.
Our job is to make sure that the players that are in the system are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the DHS is doing what they're supposed to be doing, parents are doing what they're required to do, the courts are on track, and the children's needs are being met. So from my perspective, it's a wonderful position to be in, and that has been consistent the whole time I've been doing it. Will the system continue to work? Yes. The value that we bring to it is a group of people who are outside of the system. Rather than the fox watching the hen house, we are an independent group of volunteers who just make sure everything's being done correctly. If we didn't have the CRB, reviews would still happen, and the courts would be overwhelmed by the number of people that they have to deal with. I don't think families would be as well served. We have a better opportunity to go more in detail about a case. We hear from people that the courts don't hear from, so we get a broader perspective of what's going on with the family. And I think if we didn't have CRB, we'd lose all of that. The way that I envision CRB 10 years out and our role as part of a community is sort of twofold, that we continue doing the work we're doing in terms of keeping our pulse on the system and keeping them honest. Every county does things a little bit differently. And if we can, as part of my vision, get to the place wherever you go, you see the same kind of thing in terms of the system, so that statewide there's some consistency in how families are processed through child welfare. My goal is to rise up out of the ashes, so to speak, and recreate that process, but this time involve not just the CRB people, but our partners in the process. The attorneys, DHS, other people who sit around the table and really look at what's going to be in the best interest of the children and not just from defending a job position.
Thank you, Ellen. Ellen really talks about the need for casting the net wide when you have these strategic conversations. And I am so honored that you invited me in to the conversation that you're beginning here in these 2 days together. And I want you to think of it that way, that it's okay if you don't solve every problem today, but that this is the beginning of a conversation, and you're all here to have it. And the important work that you do, I had you clap for yourselves earlier because I'm so impressed with the work you do, and you can pat yourselves on the back for that. It is amazing. And being here together and talking about these issues and casting your net this wide and thinking this big, giving yourselves permission to think this big, you can pat yourselves on the back for that too. And now we're all done patting on the back, because I also want to challenge you to think even bigger. Who else should be a part of this conversation? Who else should be in this room? When you do this next year, who should be here? Who will you pick up the phone and talk to next week? When you have these conversations today, how will you keep having those conversations and make things happen next month and the month after that, when you go back to your busy lives? What is the catalytic potential of this group casting their net out to their networks and bringing in more diversity and bringing in more young people? What is the catalytic potential of that for the CRB? I don't think we can even begin to conceive of it yet. I don't think we've even really imagined it yet. That's my charge to you. You have done fantastic work, but it's still time to roll up our sleeves because there's so much more to do. Thank you again for inviting me to be here. Appreciate it.